Hello, welcome to the fifth and final center in our final unit of bird calls this year for ELF. This center is called Calling All Birds, and if you are into biology, or maybe you're a biologist, this might be the center for you. This center really gets into the details of the anatomy of the bird, compares it to human anatomy, and looks at how birds make the calls they do, and talks about the specifics and what I think are pretty amazing facts about what birds can do and how they do it. So what you'll find in the center is a lot of background material, and you may want to give yourself a couple extra minutes if you're going to take this center to read through a couple of these pages beforehand just to give yourself some background. The outline does a fairly good job, but there are some very detailed descriptions of bird biology on these sheets. So what you'll find in here first, there's a couple of general diagrams to the bird and the biology that they use to make calls. For instance, on here it shows the lungs, air sacs, the syrinx, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, their trachea, and it gives a general diagram of the bird's anatomy. There's one that's a little more detailed and looks at the connection to the lungs and some of the more detail about the syrinx itself, where the birds actually make sounds. And then finally, this is a very detailed description about the syrinx itself, the different junctions that it has with the lungs and the bronchia, etc. So some of the interesting detail on here, just to give you a heads up, it says several times, for instance, that birds can use 100% of the air that they breathe in order to make sounds, whereas humans, we only use about 2% of the air that's going through our system to make sounds. So obviously some benefits to that. The volume of the sounds birds can make is pretty obvious, I think, to all the kids. The other thing that's in this center is a diagram of the human anatomy of the respiratory system. And obviously we can use this to compare with what the bird has to use. So talking about the lungs, the trachea, the fact that we make our sounds through the larynx, and then we use our tongue, our teeth, our lips to create different sounds. Whereas the birds, the biology, the anatomy that they have in their beak is obviously a lot simpler than ours, so they need to use the biology that's in their syrinx to make the sounds. So for instance, another interesting fact in here is that some birds can control two different membranes within their syrinx independently, so they can make two sounds at the same time. So a very complex system in order to make all these calls that they have. So an activity that you can do once you discuss the biology, there are blank diagrams here of both the human anatomy and the bird anatomy, and the kids can take one of these, and after you discuss the different parts of the system, you can have them write and identify the different parts. Obviously the older kids could probably be more successful here. We want to do this with the younger kids, maybe do one as a group and look at the different parts of the anatomy. If time permits, what else you'll find in this bin, I don't have it here now, are balloons and rubber bands. And what you can use these for is to represent what's happening within the bird's syrinx to make the noise. So we've all blown up a balloon and you pull on the opening as the air is escaping, and obviously the tighter you pull, the vibrations make the pitch higher. Same with the rubber band. The kid can hold the rubber band and twang, make the sound, and the tighter it is, the higher the sound is going to be. So relating that to the biology of the bird to talk about how they're adjusting the membranes within their syrinx in order to make different sounds. So obviously we'll make a lot of noise in the classroom, so play with those as you wish, depending on the setting in your classroom. Finally, what's in this center is a really interesting book which gives you the opportunity to cycle through and listen to a whole bunch of different bird calls. So, for instance, I play the call of a red-winged blackbird here, and the way the book works is you can just cycle through the number. You can look at the index and see the different birds. A lot of the local birds are labeled in here, and you can cycle through and listen to individual bird calls, talk to the kids about the pitches, and hopefully relate it back to some of the anatomy and biology that you've taught them about the birds. So hopefully this will be a fun center. As always, if you have any questions, email us at mitchellelf@gmail.com.